Hello and welcome to Atop the Fourth Wall, where bad comics burn. Patreon-sponsored review time again, but first let's talk for a second about villains. Is it just me, or do people seem to have a huge fixation on supervillains? Now don't get me wrong, the Marvel Cinematic Universe is in desperate need of more complex villains, especially when Loki is the most compelling, while other villains are either super serious sticks in the mud, or can be frustratingly jokey to the point of annoyance, but I'm seeing more and more of a tendency for people to be more interested in the villains than the heroes. You see this in TV shows with recurring villains, like in Doctor Who, where an episode featuring old familiar favorites will more likely attract an audience than a newer menace, even if the episode itself isn't up to snuff. You see it in my own fan base, who, for a few years now, have been asking me to devote time during Secret Origins Month to the first appearances of villains. And most unfortunately, you see it over in DC Comics. A lot of DC's heroes are defined not only by themselves, but by their villains, some becoming no better than jokes, and some that really should have remained jokes. But still, it feels like they spend a little too much time focusing on those villains and seeing how much darker and quote-unquote edgier they can be made. Apparently someone felt that not only did the Joker need to cut off his own face and staple it back on, but that he should also be some kind of uber god mode villain that is completely unstoppable and also some kind of immortal spirit or something. I don't know, I didn't read Batman Endgame, and I suspect it'll be ignored from here on out. But why this fascination with villains? Is it an optimistic assumption that if one got superpowers, they'd use them for good, thus those who use them for evil are considered fascinating? Or is it the other way around, a cynical assumption that if granted power, people would use them malevolently without concern for consequences? I don't know the answer, but it's been on my mind as of late. And apparently on DC's as well. For a while now, DC has been pushing their villains, most recently in a Villains Month with stupid lenticular covers that nobody asked for and nobody wanted. Or at least somebody must have wanted them, because I blame them for the current trend of completely unnecessary variant covers that, well, much as I hate to say it, look much better than the actual covers to the comics. I had a point somewhere. Oh, right, Villains Month. Villains Month was a tie-in to Forever Evil, an event that itself spawned out of another event called Trinity War, and was about the evil crime syndicate from another dimension coming into the main DC universe and taking over. If you're not aware, the crime syndicate comes from what is basically the Mirror Universe DCU. Good is evil, evil is good, and all reality television was replaced with a new Star Trek television universe. And thus every comic in September had multiple issues focusing on various villains and their shenanigans. This is in spite of the fact that the event's entire premise was, what if evil won? The exact same premise behind Grant Morrison's confusing and head-tilting Final Crisis, which also had its own stupid Villains Month called Faces of Evil. Except not as stupid, because Villains Month went all in with pointlessness. I mentioned the stupid lenticular covers in 3D, but they also felt the need to screw with the numbering. Instead of just having a ton of one-shots all focused around the villains, and what you would think would be the case given the names of the villains were written over the names of the heroes' own books, they numbered their comics on a decimal system. Years ago, I joked about this sort of thing. I mean, what's even the point? They're not connected to each other, yet we have Detective Comics number 23.1, 23.2, etc. How come when I'm kidding about bad ideas, they come true, but none of the ideas for improving things ever happen? Am I not being sarcastic enough? And thus we come to today's book, Green Lantern number 23.1, aka Relic number 1. Relic is actually a newer character invented in the New 52. I'll get more into his backstory during the comic itself, mostly because the comic is about his backstory and the problems I have with it. So let's dig into Green Lantern number 23.1 and see why this required its own special decimal numbering.
Not an artist, anyone who's had a bad comic published. It could be your thumping trucks, Linkara. This comic sucks, Linkara. When the lights go down in the city and the sun shines.
You know what's weird about this cover? Mine is not the lenticular one, and as I brought up last week, DC finally dropped the New 52 label from their comics, even if they're overall sticking with the universe it created. But that label was on there for over 3 years, despite no longer being new and the amount of comics published fluctuating. And yet, despite the lenticular cover featuring the New 52 label, this plain cover does not have it. I don't get it. Did the editor just forget to add it in? Or were they late to a lunch and decided, whatever, nobody's gonna buy this when the other one is 3D anyway? Here's another detail that bugs me about this Villains Month thing. A lot of the villain titles are just haphazardly painted over the heroes' logos. I mean, with some of them that would make sense, but Relic here is a gigantic scientist. You're telling me that he writes with finger paint? You know that riff I did last year? Graffiti, fun, or dumb? Yeah, this one definitely falls into the latter category. There's not much else to say about it. Hal Jordan is chained to an asteroid, and Relic is telling us to talk to the hand. Actually, I think the idea is that he's tossing all these broken lantern rings at the reader. Except Relic is huge. He's basically tossing a bunch of items that are smaller than breadcrumbs at us, and I have a hard time believing he actively knew he was doing it. On the plus side, though, he's ready to bust some ghosts with that proton pack he's got on. We open in The Existence Before Ours. You know, in the time before the internet. Those were dark days, my friends. Referring to this rainbow kaleidoscope in space, we have this narration. A wondrous display, dazzling light of every hue cast against the black, unblemished canvas of space. Unfortunately, the artist was supposed to be making a sculpture, and so the person who commissioned it is not very happy. He states that while people might think it's a celebration, in reality, it's a battle. None of these guys are actually characters in this comic, so I'll just refer to them anytime we see them by their lantern colors. Time for backstory! As part of Jeff Johns' relaunch of the Green Lantern books, he introduced the idea that Green Lanterns were not the only colored lanterns out there, that there was an entire emotional spectrum that beings could call upon. Green was willpower, although I personally interpret it as courage, because willpower is not an emotion, it is simply a driving force. Plus, it would make more sense for when new Green Lanterns are chosen, the ring says, "You have the ability to overcome great fear," but I digress. Yellow was fear, or rather instilling fear in people. Orange, avarice. Red, anger. Violet, love. Indigo, compassion. And blue, hope. Who knew emotions were just a basic paint set? I snark, but I do like the idea of the multiple lantern corps. What I don't like is what this comic, and the story this led into, proposed. So anyway, in the time before time, the different proto-lanterns waged war with one another. It did not have to end. They could have fought each other pointlessly for much longer. He had tried to warn the lightsmiths. At times they warred together against a common enemy. Other times they turned their wars upon themselves. Still other times they attended Magic the Gathering tournaments together. Whatever the reason, the effect was the same. The fuel of all existence was being depleted. Oh great, the comic is about an environmental message. Should I have labeled this PSA hell? He explains pretty much what I've already told you guys, that the lightsmiths forged weapons using the emotional spectrum and labels off the emotions from their own perspective. Basically the same emotions, just variations, like gluttony for avarice, resolve for willpower, etc. Also, apparently in the old universe, everyone looked like some kind of monster. And yet the violet lightsmiths do not have the scantily clad outfits of the Star Sapphires. Funny, isn't it? Also, I bet that red lightsmith would make a great opera singer. In the lightsmith's hands, the weapons performed unbelievable feats. The shadow puppets they created were unmatched. He also describes other powers that their respective lights granted them, like the blue light healing people, or the indigo light allowing instant teleportation. Because, you know, having a lot of compassion allows you to bend space and time. Others shaped the light into solid constructs limited only by the wielder's imagination. Disaster struck when this task was handed over to Hollywood executives. Entire civilizations were built not with wood or stone or alloy, but with light.
Sounds like a really crappy plan, but okay.
Relic summoned the lightsmiths together and pled his case, that the light they were using was actually a finite resource, and that there must be a reservoir of the energy they utilized, and if they weren't careful, it would run out, and, well, that whole building entire civilizations using light instead of actual construction materials would kinda screw people over. For the light wasn't merely a distillation of emotion into energy, as they had long believed. It was the essence of existence itself. And here's my big problem with Relic's backstory. The comics played out and proved that he was correct. Except that is utter bullcrap and flies in the face of everything we know about this entire concept. Admittedly, it's comic book science, so it's all bullcrap, but you get what I mean. If this is just some energy reserve that they're tapping into, why does it only work through emotion? If emotions are generating the energy, shouldn't utilizing our emotions always be refilling this thing? How exactly does that make any sense when each color of the spectrum also has a creature that embodies that emotion and the energy wielded? What, are they just totems for this reservoir? How does this also relate to the white and black lanterns, representing life and death respectively? Supposedly, all the lights together create white, but then why is there a creature that embodies it? How did this well get there in the first place? And if the lantern batteries don't just convert emotional energy into physical energy, how exactly do they tap into this well? Especially if no one even knew it was there. What about superheroes who we've learned also tap into emotional spectrum power? Are they draining the well too? Why all the different emotions tapping into it if it's all just one big glob of energy? Hell, how does it divide into its constituent lights when it's being drained? Or are there multiple reserves?
It just raises too many questions.
Basically, this reservoir is a huge-ass retcon. DC retconning something when they have no good reason to do so? I've never heard of such a thing. It creates problems for long-term storytelling, since after the storyline, suddenly everybody's afraid of using their lantern powers. And of course, this means it has to be addressed later on, since they're still going to use the powers, or else there isn't any story. Otherwise, it's just the adventures of Hal Jordan, test pilot. And thus they're always draining it, and eventually it will run out. Then again, I doubt it would be the adventures of Hal Jordan, test pilot, since it's been like years since there's been like a regular issue where he's on Earth fighting supervillains there. You know what this reminds me of? In Star Trek The Next Generation, there was this episode where they tried to do an environmental message about warp travel damaging space, and so Starfleet imposed this Warp 5 speed limit, and it was pretty much dropped after The Next Generation ended, even putting it in unpublished materials that they fixed the problem off-screen simply because it was such a stupid concept due to it destroying their own storytelling engine. And speaking of sabotaging their own narrative, let's talk about how lazy this comic is. In case you haven't noticed, every page in this comic is a splash page, and there is no dialogue. This is all caption boxes telling this story. That's the next best part of this. Since it's all done in narrative captions and all about Relic's struggle to stop the Lightsmiths, you would think he would be the one telling the story. Except it's not, unless Relic speaks about himself in the third person, which he doesn't, so we're just left wondering who the hell is telling us all of this? Oh, and it gets stupider, if you can believe it. See, I complained about the emotional reservoir thing not making any sense within its own universe, but hey, I guess you could conceivably say that's how this worked this whole time. But now this narrator is pulling stuff out of its ass. Was not gravity simply one object's passion to be near another? No! Do not even the basest life forms persevere because of emotion? Yes, that mold on your stale bread perseveres because of the feels. Desire for what they had, terror of losing it, fury towards the gluttony of others who sought to take it. Man, the first draft of Inside Out was weird. Wasn't survival nothing more than a vast exercise of resolve?
Name of the game. Raise your hand if you're full of crap.
Naturally, nobody believed his theories, calling him a relic of an old time, because simply being the last survivor of his universe wasn't justification enough for his name, I guess. They demanded proof, so he assembled a ship and a bunch of technology in the hopes of finding the reservoir itself. Eventually, he came to the Source Wall, a structure around the entire universe. You'd think something that big would be a lot more visible anywhere in the universe, but whatever. That can't be penetrated. This is stuff tied into the New Gods mythos, and in the wake of Countdown, another notch on my all bad comics can somehow be tied back into Countdown theory that frankly seems to have more weight behind it than the emotional reservoir theory. It was retconned so as to be the physical barrier between parallel universes, and traveling between universes damaged the wall, so that if it was ever destroyed, the multiverse would get all blowed up or something. Anything that touches the wall is absorbed into it, so scientific study of it is difficult. However, he was too late in his searches, since the reservoir starts running out. First with the blue lightsmiths. Get it? Because hope dies first. Except, of course, obviously the emotion itself still exists, so that makes no sense. The lightsmiths realized that Relic was right, but because these people are not the brightest, pun not intended, but I'll take credit for it anyway, their decided course of action was to wage war with one another over what little light remained. Not exactly sure what they hoped to accomplish by doing so, but then again, these are the same people who decided to make buildings out of flashlight beams instead of concrete. And here's Relic, flying around their dead bodies in his super space jetpack. He flies up to the last green lightsmith and proclaims, in the only actual dialogue balloons in this comic, even though this is space and he probably can't hear him, "We could have stopped this. You should have listened." Yes, rub it in the face of the dying man, Relic. I bet everyone's gonna be really sad they won't get to listen to you anymore. Also, the universe is apparently making a Rorschach painting with the stars. Ooh, a bunny! But yeah, here's where we get even more stupidity. See, remember that bullcrap about gravity just being passion? Yeah, he wasn't being flowery. He was talking literally, because with the well exhausted, the universe itself begins to fall apart. Yeah, turns out all functions of reality are tied into this well. Heat, molecules, digital watches. They're all connected to this thing, so with the well gone, the universe just dies. Which then just begs further questions about this whole emotional energy reservoir, since if all of creation is connected to it, wouldn't that mean that existence itself is constantly draining it? It's not even really clear what the hell happens. It looks like planets and stars are falling into a black hole. I don't know. Yet Relic is able to escape away from that and instead head to the Source Wall, which is also crumbling. And since Relic is all about science and crap, he decides, why not, and goes to explore what's on the other side of the crumbling wall. And indeed, that was where the well was stored, but by traveling through it, he was deconstructed and then rebuilt as part of the new universe that occurred in this space. Not sure how the hell that happens, but hey, cameo of the big giant hand forming the universe that's always seen whenever DC shows the origins of the universe. So, did Relic's universe have the big giant hand too? How does the universe just start over like this? I mean internally, not from the DC rebooted everything again perspective. He was reformed as part of a new existence. Reorganized, remade, Republican. No longer a relic in name only, but by definition as well. So what the hell was his name before Relic? Or as part of his origin, was it also his nickname in high school too? Billions of years passed, and I guess Relic decided to take a nap or something, since he laid dormant during all of that inside of a space-time anomaly until he was found by Kyle Rayner and the Guardians of the Universe. Long story. Beings in awe of the vast universe they were only beginning to explore. Beings driven by curiosity to ask questions and seek answers. Curiosity, the engineer of progress. And yet curiosity isn't really part of the emotional spectrum. Neither is happiness, really. Or are those corollaries of other emotions? Revulsion also isn't part of the spectrum. Is that a part of fear? But no, disgust was separated out from fear in Inside Out, and none of you guys actually care. I'm just stalling. Their approach woke Relic up, and he decided that his last method of dealing with this, coming at them reasonably with science and debate, failed to convince people. So this time, you'll just try being a dick to them and stopping them by force. Dude, your approach failed because you had no evidence of your frankly stupid hippie theory about how we're, like, all connected by our feelings, man. And so our comic ends with Relic awakening and showing off that apparently the old universe used to be a lot bigger. I think we got kind of screwed over on living space in the new place. This comic sucks! I'll grant you, the artwork is good, and despite Relic's theory being stupid, he actually has a believable motivation. But that motivation is based on an unnecessary and frankly idiotic retcon. It's certainly not the worst comic in the world, but it's definitely one of the laziest. There's barely any story here. This origin could have been told in a 2-page spread outlining the basics about the emotional reservoir and about being a scientist, because there's no substance to this comic. 20 pages of Relic is a scientist and everyone else didn't listen to him. That's it! No characterization, nothing about his own life or experiencing the horror of the universe dying and him not being able to do anything about it. Just him telling a guy, "Told you so." Was this put together at the last minute for this stupid Villains Month? How is it that an entire universe dies, and yet I'm not moved to care about any of it? Next time, we go back to the 90s so that I don't spend the next 100 years reviewing everything related to the next generation of heroes. With Team Youngblood. And yet I can't be certain whether it's that or this comic that has less effort put into it. Behold my Villains Month title card! Isn't it super impressive? And now, a word from one of our sponsors.
Hello, I'm Crimson Rogue, host of The Book is Better and all-around admirer of the written word. And as you can tell from the show's totally unbiased title, we feature plenty of books here. However, far too often people, like those in Hollywood, try to recreate these fantastic novels but have no idea what they're doing. Characterization gets dropped, plot lines get rushed, or the script relies on special effects over storytelling, and it's important to understand where these movies went wrong. Now, obviously, there are limitations in both books and movies, and often the book is better, but sometimes the movie's better. And it's my job to explain why as calmly and professionally as possible.
Stop breaking character!
Okay, so I might have a bit of an anger management problem.